After some dominance in the Champions League from Premier League teams, showing why we are the best league in Europe, we are now closer to finding out more about blank game week 34 and double game week 33. Welcome to another transfer tips video. Make sure you like and subscribe, and let's get right into the video. Now these are the graphs we are looking at to analyse the potential blanks and doubles. Big shout out to Ben Krellin. Make sure you're following him on Twitter. He is the blank game week and double game week mastermind. He made the graphic in the top right, as you can see the credits there. I need to say a few things before anyone gets confused. So in the bottom right we have a graphic which shows the chances of fixtures being postponed in the Premier League due to teams qualifying to the FA Cup semi-finals. Now there are 8 teams in the quarterfinals, meaning there are a potential 8 teams that could have their fixtures postponed. Those 8 teams also have opponents, so there are a lot of potential blanks still floating around. The teams that will have their game week 34 fixture postponed are the ones that play in the FA Cup semi-finals and their opponents in the Premier League for that match week. But a postponed fixture in game week 34 does not mean they will double or even blank. The two graphs, the one in the top left and the one in the top right, these will help us analyse which teams may have a bigger chance of doubling than others. The one in the bottom right is just to show the chances of postponement. The percentages here are rounded to the nearest 10%, not my percentages. So it's the most likely outcome of each scenario, but then again, nothing is guaranteed. Port Vale could knock Chelsea out of the FA Cup. I very much doubt it, but it could happen. So let's start off by looking at the teams that could have their fixtures postponed. Then we'll look at how likely they are to actually have a blank in game week 34 and a double in either game week 33 or game week 36. Now we have Chelsea, Brighton, Arsenal and Newcastle. Chelsea and Arsenal are still in the FA Cup and they both have easy fixtures. Arsenal play away to Southampton, Chelsea play home to Port Vale. If these teams win those FA Cup quarterfinals, which they probably will, their fixture will be postponed. That's very likely. I think all of us are assuming those two teams are going to go through, which will cause some postponements. A little below that, we have teams that are just a little over halfway in terms of the chance of them qualifying. We have Man City and West Ham, who play Burnley, which is Man City's game, and Everton, which is West Ham's game. We then have the opponents of Manchester City and West Ham. West Ham play Leeds, Man City play Liverpool. Man City and West Ham are the favourites, which is why they have a higher likelihood of having their blank game week 34 fixture postponed. Now, what's the likelihood of these postponements going into either double game week 33 or double game week 36? Well, they can have a guaranteed blank game week 34 leading to a double game week, most likely in double game week 33, if they reach the quarterfinals of a European competition. But the Premier League decided to say, you know what, we don't want to try. I mean, well, they tried, they were just awful at trying. So all of them are behind or tied going into the second leg, which is not good for the chances of a double game week. Now that's not to say, let's give you an example. Man City are 3-0 down to Real Madrid in the first leg. It's not looking good. If Man City reach the semi-finals of the FA Cup, their blank game week 34 fixture will be postponed. Just because they didn't reach the quarterfinal of the Champions League doesn't mean they're not going to have a blank or a double. It just means there's a chance they won't. They could still double in game week 33 and blank in game week 34. It really all depends on the scheduling of the Premier League, which is why they are in the don't know section, which is where a lot of these teams are, because there's no one I can really say confidently that I think is actually going to qualify into the next round. For example, you get the Liverpool game, right? If Liverpool qualified to the semi-finals of the FA Cup, it's still very likely, or not very likely, it's still likely they will have a guaranteed blank and double, because the likelihood of both Liverpool and Crystal Palace not reaching a European quarter-final is just so unlikely. I think at least one of them has to make it, despite Liverpool currently being 1-0 down in the first leg. So yeah, those are your examples. We'll start off from the top. Chelsea, they're probably going to get knocked out by PSG. They're 3 goals down. They didn't do too well. Despite winning on XG and PSG having under 1 XG that game, they still managed to score 5 goals. So that's fairly unlucky to Chelsea. It's not all their fault. They are in the don't know section because they're probably not getting to the Champions League quarter-final. That means Brighton are the exact same. Arsenal are currently 1-0 to Leverkusen, but they play the home fixture next. I fancy Arsenal against Leverkusen in the home fixture, so I reckon they're likely to have that blank game week 34 and double game week 33. And obviously, Newcastle come along with them. As for Man City and Burnley, we just talked about it. Once again, they're probably not going to get that guaranteed blank and double, but there is still a chance for it. It's unpredictable. It just depends what, Sky Sports and the Premier League will want to do with their fixture scheduling. We then have West Ham and Everton. Now this one is a bit different. There is almost no chance these guys have a double game week or a blank game week, even if West Ham go through, because West Ham have a Monday fixture in these game weeks, which means they can allow a little extra rest, having a 3-day gap between a midweek fixture rather than a 2-day gap, meaning their fixture will most likely, almost definitely move to the midweek of blank game week 34. So their fixture is going to be played in that game week. It's just not going to be played on the weekend. It's going to be played in the midweek, a few days later than all the other games. So the chance of West Ham and Everton actually getting a blank and a double, very unlikely. And obviously neither team is in a European competition. The same goes for Leeds and Bournemouth. These guys are in a similar boat to West Ham and Everton, except they don't have a Monday fixture. So when their fixture gets rescheduled, they are more likely to get put into a blank or double in blank game week 34 or double game week 33. So again, a lot of this is just up in the air. I'm not really giving you a lot of info, but I'm telling you that we don't know, which is still better than knowing nothing, even though technically I know nothing. Then we have that Liverpool and Palace game. I think if Liverpool get past Man City in the FA Cup quarterfinals, which I don't think they will, if they do, they will probably have that blank in game week 34 and that double in game week 33. Okay, now we'll look at the general fixture difficulty rating. I've left the percentages in this graph as well. It's not really affected my decisions too much because the teams with the good fixtures are fairly obvious and the teams with the bad fixtures are also fairly obvious. The ones with a blank game week in a couple game weeks time are obviously at the bottom because that's a guaranteed 0-pointer. But you watch this. If a team that's blanking in game week 31 has a player that gets a massive haul, let's say a random Arsenal player like Zubimendi gets 15 points, I guarantee there will be thousands of people transferring the guy in for blank game week 31, even though he's guaranteed not to play. Just you watch. Something like that will definitely happen. At the top of this list, we have a few clear front runners, mainly Brentford and Liverpool. Those are the teams to target right now, but obviously it could be a little different if you're on wildcard 32. But then again, just looking at the next 2 game weeks, there's no team that really tops Brentford or Liverpool for a fixture run aside from maybe Bournemouth. So no matter whether you're on wildcard in game week 32 or not, I think the players you target are going to be relatively similar anyway. The only exceptions is maybe Fulham and Bournemouth, because these two have a fairly good next 2 game weeks, but long term they are terrible. And it's a great way to dead end your team into some differentials that other people who aren't using their wildcard in game week 32 won't have access to. Well, they could have access to players like Wilson, they could bring him in, but they'd have to take a hit to sell him in game week 32 when the fixtures get absolutely terrible. And the teams that are in tier 2, so the teams that still have a good fixture run, they're not great. Like Sunderland, you could target a defender, maybe an attacker, but I wouldn't recommend it. Forest players we will talk about in the players to buy section because there are some okay assets. Burnley assets are not amazing. I may have recommended one in this video, which I may come to regret, but I was limited for options. What can I say? We then have Brighton, who are probably the most infuriating team to pick assets from. They're just so annoying. There's so much rotation. There's so much coming onto good form and coming onto bad form. It's impossible to predict. And as for Aston Villa, they have a poor entry point and their players are also unpredictable. Morgan Rogers is good at football, but he's not exactly a goal involvement magnet. And Watkins is the rotation risk now. So there's no real telling what to do with those players. I personally would avoid them. Another thing worth talking about is probably about Chelsea. I've rated them pretty low on the fixture difficulty rating, but I wouldn't recommend selling your Chelsea players. Like home to Newcastle and away to Everton isn't exactly awful, it's just not great. But you definitely don't want to sell a player like João Pedro or Cole Palmer or Chalobah ahead of these games. They do have a tough one in their home to Man City, but after that it's not too difficult. So that's definitely a run you could hold your Chelsea players for. Anyway, enough of talking about fixtures. I'm getting sick of it. Let's look at the players to buy for game week 30. Okay, we are looking at the first all red players to buy graph all season. Now, these red teams are just dominating at the moment. We are first talking about Murillo, who I've given a 6 out of 10. Personally, wouldn't be so eager to bring this guy in. Like, that Forest defense isn't sensational, and their position in the league shows that. In terms of going forward, he's also not great, but the fixture run is good. The hunger is there. They need to avoid relegation. And the DEFCONs are there, not to mention they are actually keeping clean sheets somehow against all odds. Well, not against all odds, against the XG odds. Above him, we have Konate, one of 2 Liverpool defenders on this list. Now, I actually put him in this graph before the Champions League game, thinking he was nailed at centre-back. And don't get me wrong, he still probably is. But after that performance in the midweek, I don't know, he may be walking on eggshells. He may be on thin ice. So just be careful of that one. I think he's going to be fine, but no guarantees. That Liverpool defensive data is good and the fixture run is good, That is why he has made it into this list. Not to mention, still good for defcons, just like every other defender is on this list. But above Konate, we have a Sunderland defender. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Sunderland, right? They're not the best team in the league, but their attack is a lot worse than their defense. Like, the defense is the strong point, and that is why we are talking about a Sunderland defender. He has decent expected clean sheets along with Sunderland. I don't know why. Somehow they do. I thought they were quite poor on XG, but they're doing quite well. And them defcon numbers in the last 8 game weeks look sensational. Not to mention, he can bag a goal in now and then. With him, you're looking at a cheap defender who's going to get consistent low scores, you know, with defcons, maybe a goal involvement, and the clean sheet potential is also there. So a good player to target if you're on a budget, but if you can afford more, you should probably go for more. Above him, we have Van den Berg, playing for an okay defense that has the best fixture run in the league. And going forward recently, he has been fairly strong, obviously, like everyone on this list. He's also alright for defcons. 8.8 per 90 isn't bad at all. He's been hitting it quite a lot recently. Then at the top of this list, we have the bane of my existence. This guy just cannot seem to stop hurting my rank, and it's getting on my nerves. You know, a defender that's averaging more than 0.5 goal involvements per 90 is a force to be reckoned with, and those defcon numbers are really good. The defensive data is really good for Liverpool. He is quite easily the best defender to own right now. Obviously, Arsenal defenders are great as well, but you wouldn't look to buy them because they have a blank game week in blank game week 31, making Van Dijk easily the best one to buy. In fact, going into game week 30, I will probably be one of the only FPL managers that doesn't own him. But if you look at my team selection, you will understand why I'm not bringing him in. You know, I've got too many good defenders already. On to the midfielders now, and it is another all red section. These guys are dominating it, and we have another Forest player sitting at the bottom of the graph in Morgan Gibbs-White, who I think is an incredibly underrated differential. Like I said, Forest have the fight in them right now. They know they need to stay up, and that fixture run is there. The Gibbs-White data is not terrible, but it's not awful at the same time. The guy can score a goal, and even though the expected assists are low, he is not afraid of getting assists. He will pick at least one more up before the end of the season. I'm sure of it. And he's, you know, he's not too expensive, to be honest. It depends if he's on penalties or not. Like, I think he would be on penalties because a couple of seasons ago, he was the penalty taker. Then it went to Chris Wood because he was playing loads and scoring more. Now Chris Wood's not playing. I think it's going to fall back to Morgan Gibbs-White. But I don't think Forest have had a penalty in a while, so I'm not 100% sure. If he is on penalties, he definitely makes sure he's worth that price tag. If not, he may be a little overpriced, you know, compared to those Brentford guys at the top, but still a really good play to own, a really good differential if you already own the likes of Dango Iwatara and Kevin Schade. Above him, we have a player who I think is going to be very low owned and probably one of the best players to own this game week because Spurs have conceded some of the most goals to attacking mids all season. We're not looking at the data for him because he's only played one game in the last 4. It's not reliable data. I unfortunately had to sell him when he got injured. I really wanted to own him. I think I'd be better off if I kept him, but I haven't been able to. Like I've said already, that Liverpool fixture run is good, and I think Wirtz is easily the best midfielder to target from Liverpool. Like, I know Szoboszlai is alright, but Szoboszlai isn't always guaranteed to play attacking. He could be a right back, and I know some players are coming back from injury, but even with Frimpong there, you know, he could play right wing, and Szoboszlai could play right back. It just doesn't make me want to go there, and I know he's been scoring great free kicks this season, but I don't think that's sustainable, which is why I put Wirtz here and Szoboszlai isn't. Above Wirtz, we have Bruno Fernandes, who I think is the best captain this game week. So the reason he's not at the top is because that United fixture run isn't that good, but the underlying data for Bruno, especially creatively speaking, is ridiculous. I think he is probably the most essential midfielder to own going forward because in the last 9 game weeks, he's got 7 returns, 4 of those turns being double-digit hauls. Absolute must-have player. Please don't miss out on Bruno Fernandes. Now, we got the Brentford guys on top. Kevin Schade a little below Dango Iwatara because Kevin Schade is a little more expensive. He's a little less clinical and has no real creative potential, which is why I've put him below Dango Iwatara. Nonetheless, he's still a great player to own. Sort of like Morgan Gibbs-White in the sense where his data isn't great, but it's also not awful. I believe he is a great player to own, and Dango Iwatara is only slightly above him. The only reason I like Dango Iwatara more is because he's more clinical. Like, fair enough, he's got no goals in the last 4, but when he gets a big chance, he normally scores it. I can't say the same for Kevin Schade, and creatively speaking, Dango Iwatara is a lot better, creates way more big chances, just has more avenues in general to go down to get points because he is normally the guy that also wins the penalties. Now we are onto the forwards, and there is no all red anymore. Okay guys, we are switching it up and we are recommending a Burnley player. I think maybe for the first time this season. I don't know how it's going to go. I was limited for forward options. I had to pick 5 forwards. And Fleming, he's not been awful recently. Like, the data here is not terrible. He's picking up big chances. Like I mentioned earlier, that Burnley fixture run is good. Could Fleming score some goals? Guys, I very much doubt it. But he could, you know. Next up, we have Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Now, the next 3 fixtures aren't ideal, but Calvert-Lewin has scored in plenty difficult games this season. His data is all right. But the main reason I think he's one of the better forwards to own, despite still not being great, is because his fixture run long term is amazing. Leeds have one of the best end of season run-ins I've seen in a while. He plays home to Wolves in that fixture you can see at the very bottom in 4 game weeks time, then plays away to Bournemouth, then plays home to Burnley, and the fixtures to close out the season are also really good. So if you're looking for a striker long term, Calvert-Lewin is your guy, but he's not necessarily amazing, so I'm not going to big him up too much. The top 3 is where it's at. João Pedro, I have a bone to pick with this guy. He decided to play away to one of, you know, the better defences in the league. They have a strong home defence, Aston Villa, and they let João Pedro score 3 past him. You know, 1.43 expected goals per 90, by the way. It is ridiculous. He is way ahead of everyone else. When you include the fact none of those expected goals come from penalties, it is unreal. A player I am scared to go without. I'm not going to bring him in because I've got 3 forwards in Thiago, Ekitike and Haaland. João Pedro, while he's not got a great fixture run, he's proven he can score in many fixtures. I'm going to be scared to go without him. I hope he slows down very soon. I think he will, because this sort of, you know, output isn't sustainable unless you're Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi. But who knows, I could be wrong. He could be the next Ballon d'Or winner. Very much doubt it, but you know, nothing's impossible. Now we head on to the top 2. Ekitike, underlying data-wise, very inferior to João Pedro. I don't think anyone's surprised about that. I prefer Ekitike more because he has that better run of games. And I know it's not a lot. Like, you have 1.43 XG per 90 versus 0.33 XG per 90, but the fixtures carry Ekitike over the line, and I do believe that fixtures encourage good form. And like I said, I don't think João Pedro's rate of success is sustainable. I mean, if you look when he played away to Aston Villa and scored them 3 goals, I think he picked up over 2.7 XG in that game. They were all tap-ins. I mean, anyone could score them goals. It's not like João Pedro was the only guy that could score them. At the same time, positioning is a big thing for a striker. It's a lot better than actually being a good finisher. If you're someone who's able to get into the right positions, you'll never actually need to be a good finisher. But like I said, I still believe Ekitike is a stronger player to own because they've scored a similar amount of goals across the entire season. It's just that right now, João Pedro is on better form. But I do believe that is going to shift to Ekitike being on better form very soon, especially with Ekitike playing home to Tottenham next game week. A fantastic entry point. But in first, we have Mr. fairly off form Thiago. That Brentford fixture run is way too good to ignore, and he's a player who still sits second for goals in the Premier League behind the one and only Erling Haaland. A player with that sort of pedigree and that momentum with this fixture run, I think is easily the most essential player to own in FPL right now, especially with his ownership being so high. If he does well, which I think he will quite a lot, it's going to hurt you to go without him. If you have João Pedro, I wouldn't sell João Pedro for Thiago. But if you have Thiago, I really wouldn't recommend selling Thiago for João Pedro, which I know some of you are going to want to do because of how good João Pedro has been recently. And don't get me wrong, he's good to own, but I still strongly believe Thiago is a better forward to own than FPL going forward for the rest of the season, up until game week 35 when the Brentford fixture run kind of falls off. Anyway guys, that is it from me. If you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.